All right, Dan, can you see my screen? I'm guessing. Hoping the answer is yes.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. And I'll fire up the notes functionality. Cool. Drag this window here, that window there, back to full screen over here, full screen over there. The dangers of having too many monitors, pluses and minuses. All right, well, welcome everybody to the Cliff of Complexity workshop session here. I've got a few slides that I'm hoping to get through just about as soon as possible. I'm Steve Persch, Technical Product Marketing Manager at Pantheon. We're a web ops platform for Drupal and WordPress teams. And just right at the top, the title of this presentation is the Cliff of Complexity. In short, the Cliff of Complexity is the way in which Gatsby projects and Gatsby teams can find themselves very quickly moving from thinking, oh, this is so easy to, oh, this is a little tricky to, oh, this might have been a bad choice for this particular project. So during the course of this presentation, I'd like to give you some conversational tools that can help you and your teams uncover, like, how does that dynamic really play out? That is what I'm hoping that you get from this presentation. Conversation starters to use with your teams around, are the architectural choices that you might be making for a given project the appropriate choices to match the needs of your team. And because this is a workshop session, because we've got an expectation here of a fair amount of question and answer time allowing, I also here wanting something. I want refinement of my own perspective informed by the wider Gatsby community. I come from the Drupal and WordPress community. That's where my professional grounding is in, and I recognize that is not the entirety of the Gatsby community. That's not entirely the static site generator community. So towards the end here, I'll be tossing to Dan from Mediacurrent to share some of his experience and Mediacurrent's experience working with these sorts of websites. And I'm intending for that to open up a wider question and answer or broader conversation around how are these really playing out in the real world for real teams. You might be here just wanting to know what Pantheon is up to. If you're familiar with Pantheon, you know that we're primarily a platform for Drupal and WordPress. Right now, we're developing two offerings. One we call Decoupled Bridge for splitting traffic dynamically between PHP and a Node.js runtime at runtime, and edge sites, which is more suited to the Gatsby use case, where static site generation happens, often fed by Drupal or WordPress data. If you're not at all familiar with Pantheon, well, our mission is to make the open web a first-class platform that delivers results, and we try to do that by solving many of the common pain points that web teams run into. The founders of Pantheon and myself as well come from the background of making a whole lot of Drupal and WordPress sites for a whole lot of customers. We didn't want to have to worry about servers, and the Gatsby community tends to want to worry about servers even less. So can we remove the questions about MySQL configuration and PHP INI from Drupal and WordPress? Can we remove worries about, can I spin up one more environment for a different Git branch so I can show my content editor or my marketing stakeholder what I'm working on? We call that feature multi-dev at Pantheon. And if you're an institution like a major college with literally thousands of websites, well, our website portfolio management tools might help you manage 1,000+ WordPress instances. Through it all, we like to send the message that web ops, as we see it, is a team sport. The act of building, maintaining, measuring, and iterating upon professional websites requires specialized knowledge. It requires specialized skill sets. And as we think about Gatsby and static site generation, it requires us, coming from the Drupal and WordPress community, to think a bit about how do all of those interactions play out? And these are questions I've been thinking about for a long time. In the past few weeks, I've been going back through my own history with static site generation, and I spent a lot of my 20s thinking about the implications of pull requests and content. I found these tweets from Jeff Eaton, I think self-described content strategy ne'er-do-well is in his Twitter bio. In my 20s, I spent New Year's Eve night sending him a typo fix on a pull request. And a month before that, I sent him a pull request on a blog post draft that he hadn't even published yet. And before that, I trolled him by telling him pull requests are the new comments. This is like a month after I met my now wife. why was I thinking so much about the implications of pull requests on content? And well, one of those pull requests I was making was following a sentence that Jeff wrote. Our essential task as web professionals is giving people tools to accomplish the tasks that matter to them. That's what it all boils down to. I wish I could travel back in time to myself a decade ago and say, yes, you really should marry this this woman you're now starting to date. But I also wish I could tell myself, here's a sharper formulation of the question that you, Steve, should be asking as you go about your career. On what computer, controlled by IT or system administrators or platforms, do the templates created by developers and designers meet the content that's written by content editors, marketers, business leads, or what have you? Essentially, what computer here assembles the website? That's the question that I like to ask as much as possible these days. And I don't think there is a right or wrong answer here. There's just a lot of answers that have overlapped and evolved over the 3 decades of the World Wide Web. If we go back to the beginning, so to speak, like the developer's desktop or their brain assembled the website, combined content and templates, you upload that to a web server over FTP, site visitors come visit, and that worked well enough. There's an explosion of productivity, of activity when the LampStack CMS enabled content editors to put their content straight into the database on the live site. Oh, and yes, developers can still upload code and functionality changes, template changes to the web server, and we're still sending out a website to website visitors. With the release of the iPhone, there was a need to compete with native applications. That is, I think, perhaps the single biggest change in the history of web development practices. It sparked the responsive design movement. It sparked single page applications and so many other things. Of course, part of the reason we're here at GatsbyConf is because as so many teams saw the potential downsides, security risks, performance risks, SEO risks of doing everything in that site visitor's computer, we saw there are benefits to swinging some of this answer back behind a CDN, back into a server. That can give us a better set of trade-offs, especially if we can also still use these tools and frameworks that were developed for the browser first mindset, if we can use those back in a server context. So with something like a Node.js runtime, yes, we can render React components on a server and get perhaps a best of both worlds path. That's what Pantheon's building with our decoupled bridge offering, seen, I think, pretty clearly with frontity.org. This is a framework that basically asks, what if you like everything about WordPress, except the fact that the theme layer is this tool built in PHP that in some important ways hasn't really changed that much in about 20 years. What if you just want to use React and keep all the other parts of your WordPress workflow the same? Well, then this might be the answer for you. If, on the other hand, you see significant advantages to be had by radically rethinking just about everything of how your team works together, then you might benefit from static site generation, making the CI server be the answer to the question, what computer assembles the website? I and others at Pantheon, though, wanted to call this product offering that we're developing edge sites rather than static something something, because it's our expectation that more and more of this answer to the question, what computer assembles the website, is moving to the edge. We see in the wider ecosystem that more and more stuff is getting unlocked in edge computing. I recently found a now 8-year-old blog post from our CTO saying something like, edge side includes will be incredibly powerful to the Drupal community once the Drupal community figures out how to unlock them. And about a decade later, I think the overall web development community is finding the tools, the workflows that really unlock the power of doing things at the edge. So again, the question comes back to, on what computer do the templates meet the content? There's not necessarily a right answer here. With the tools provided by Pantheon, there is some advantage to be had by having a separate multi-dev and dev and test and live environments. If you have a traditional Drupal or WordPress site, each of these sites, each of these environments serves a separate purpose, allows you to ask different questions. One of the advantages that I've seen from so much of the Gatsby community is we actually don't need a million different environments to answer all these questions like, am I meeting my team standards? Did I break anything? Does the site owner approve? We can answer that in one step. Open up a pull request, see a preview environment, merge, go straight to live. If we're separating out back end and front end, the risks of making a bad deployment to the live environment are just a lot lower, or the negative impacts of a broken deployment to the live environment are just way lower than the potential negatives of deploying something broken to the live environment in Drupal or WordPress. So to get back to the cliff of complexity, static site generation is great when every role wants to deliver their work in the SSG way. The Pantheon docs site is a great example of that. Pull requests on content allows this team to deliver and maintain their work in a way that makes sense. For teams that are questioning, though, if this is really the right fit, I would say check your premises in the smallest possible way. Do you actually get more conversions by switching something to React? Do your developers actually collaborate better? Back-end developer, front-end developer, designer, and whatnot. Check each premise in the smallest way possible, because you might unexpectedly find yourself going up that steep slope of the cliff of complexity. For wpcampus.org, we had that to some extent. Overall, they're happy with WordPress being the place where they organize their data, Gatsby being the place to organize their content, but there are some integrations that are tricky to work out, and that's part of why there's so many WordPress sessions here at GatsbyConf, because there are a bunch of questions you have to answer. For S&T Bank, another customer we worked with in our early stages developing edge sites, some of the members of their team liked a lot of the parts of the WordPress workflow that had to change in a static generator context. If you chop off WordPress's head, if you go headless, you may have to build back more of the behavior than you would otherwise want to. And for customers, I will not name, if everyone on the team just wanted the ergonomics of the LAMP stack, they might have a bad time switching to the static site generator workflow. If essentially what you want is a LAMP stack, but performant and stable. So what computer assembles the web page is a question that I don't think has a universally correct answer. The question I hope more teams ask themselves is, are the servers serving our team, or is our team serving the servers? What's coming first here, the people or the tools? And with that, I'd love to pass it over to Dan from Mediacurrent. Dan, Mediacurrent has done a bunch of these Gatsby projects. How's it worked for you?
Yep. Yeah, I hope I can shed some light on that. So I'm going to start out with a couple of sites that I would say fall into kind of the scaling sweet spots. And so the first one is Mag Mutual. It's an insurance company. We did a Gatsby build for them earlier, or mid 2020, I think. And, you know, they've got about 2,000 pages. And their get from Gatsby is a lot of it comes from the benefit that they get from the Jamstack in general, being able to decouple your administrative users away from like users of their learning center, you know, kind of end user types. It can be valuable just to compartmentalize things. They still use Drupal 8 for the CMS. And when you're talking scaling with Gatsby, the big thing is the build time. That's kind of the benchmark of whether things are, you know, fast enough, low latency enough for an editorial team to be successful. Part of that is, you know, Steve mentioned the expectations. There's some sites out there that are, you know, going to have, they need super low latency editing. Gatsby is going to have trouble with that. There are ways to mitigate that. I'll talk about that a little bit on the next slide. That is one of the, you know, scaling factors that makes things harder. But yeah, at around 2,000 pages, this was built before incremental builds. I think the build time was like 15 minutes or something then, which nobody loved, but it was okay for the use case. And then pretty quickly we bolted on the incremental builds with Gatsby Cloud, and that's got the builds times down to like a couple minutes, usually about a minute if it's just one page. And Sandy Springs is another good one. This has even fewer pages. I think, a couple hundred or something like that. One interesting thing is it has multiple front ends. It's Drupal 8 on the back end, serving multiple front ends. This lets us keep the builds smaller. So this is always an option. Doesn't always make sense, but if you can, you might have a lot of content, but if you're only building, if you're building that out to multiple Gatsby front ends, that can make your build smaller and make things quicker, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, the commonalities, they're both small to medium builds, well under 10 to the fourth, order of magnitude of pages. And both of these were, we delivered them pre-incremental builds and they were fine. So, yeah, Steve, if you could go to the next slide. Okay. So, obviously there's sites that have a lot more content than that. And Gatsby is definitely targeting, to serve those sites too. And a key offering here is Gatsby Cloud and incremental builds. So, the biggest challenge is having lots of content. I can't put a firm number on it, but you will start to have challenges, in the mid to high thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. Things get interesting. And what'll start to happen is your full builds will be prohibitively slow. And what you can do is you can bring incremental builds into play. Incremental builds are very new, but what we've seen is they've gotten a lot better pretty quickly after they were released. The idea behind incremental builds is you only build what's needed. You change one page, you only build that one page as opposed to building the entire site. It's a little bit tricky to set up. There's a few things. There's a lot of things that kind of sound the same that you'll see, like there's fast builds for Drupal, which isn't the same as incremental builds. But once you get your recipe going, it is pretty good. I mean, it basically for one page edit, it doesn't matter how large your site is. It'll always be, a minute or so. You do have to watch out for moving the actual artifact of the files over. That can trip you up. Like if you're going from Gatsby Cloud to AWS, it's like an rsync process, and that actually takes a while. But they're working on that too. Another challenge is supporting the low latency editing. And you need preview for this. I think having Gatsby preview is kind of a must have these days, for a lot of sites. And Gatsby preview is also pretty new. For a while, it was a little shaky. Lately, it's been really good. They've made some improvements to it. So, even on big sites, we're able to get pretty quick previews going. And just another part of that can be challenging is pages that have shared content. So basically, like things that change a lot that will require you to rebuild lots of pages. Those are a challenge. That's a challenge for any caching strategy, really. But Gatsby, you can end up with like a 40-minute build because you changed added a blog post to like a related blogs or latest blogs thing that appears a bunch of places. One way you can solve this is with client-side calls. You can get the content like from React and just put it into like a area loading kind of thing. But yeah, so in short, Gatsby can scale. It just it's complexity. You start going up the cliff, and I think we're still not sure where that cliff turns into like a sheer dangerous section, and whether it's at what point it's something that's scalable.
Well, Dan, that sounds like a great potential transition to open things up for other attendees here through the chat, or I wish I understood exactly the ergonomics, but I know there is some way for attendees to bring themselves in here. I've got this moderation panel thing. I don't see anyone's Ryo, Lambert. We'll bring him in. We'll see how it goes. I will try to bring him in. Where did he go? I don't know. Somebody's name was there. I clicked on his name, and then his name went away. While we wait for more questions or more people to volunteer and share their perspective, I see some questions or at least comments have come in. Mark says, "Serve the servants." I think in response to that question of are you serving your servers, or are your servers serving the team? I think serve the servants is a good way to think about it. It's kind of servants all the way down. To go to one of my other slides, a way I often thought about my job in my previous agency days was that I, as a back-end, sometimes front-end focused Drupal developer, it was my job to supply tools, often for higher ed organizations that were building out lots of common sites. I was essentially working to provide tools for an internal university web team that then in turn needed to provide a lot of websites to a lot of individual departments, who then in turn needed to provide web pages like for professors or university administrators. So that was kind of a chain of servants all the way down. And I, as that Drupal developer, I was dependent on my technical architect, on our agency salespeople, making good decisions as well. So much of the challenges of web development are simply the challenges of human-to-human collaboration. One way we at Pantheon like to talk about it is with the need to deliver your work and the need to maintain your work. I'm likely going to revisit a presentation I did about 2 years ago that walked through the interactions from director of communications to designer to front-end developer to back-end developer to system administrator. And I think in each of those stages, in the next version I will have these fictional characters with character names. One person will just say to the next, I can't deliver my thing unless you maintain your thing. Like I, the designer, can't deliver my work unless you, the front-end developer, maintain your stuff. And the front-end developer would say to the back-end developer, like, I can't deliver my stuff unless you maintain your stuff. Back-end developer can't deliver their stuff unless the system administrator maintains their stuff. All right, I see more questions coming in here. Are incremental builds part of Gatsby 3? Dan, you might be able to give a more succinct answer there, but I think basically they've gotten better in Gatsby 3. I don't have all the details from yesterday. I'm going to watch the recording on YouTube when it hits tomorrow, but my understanding from tweets and elsewhere is that incremental builds have gotten significantly better with Gatsby 3 announced yesterday.
Yeah, that's been our impressions, like steady improvement. And yeah, Gatsby 3 supports incremental builds. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Also from Webpack 4 to Webpack 5, I see some trouble when I moved. I personally cannot speak to the finer points between Webpack 4 and 5. Dan?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
All right.
We're probably still on 4.
Yeah.
We're kind of conservative about changing that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dan, could you speak to this question from Anna about using pure React components throughout Gatsby sites? Right now, the site I'm working on is about 25% components doing rendering work.
That's a good question. So pure components, my impression, there's like the React pure component class that basically enforces the pure component like pattern, which I think could also be called dumb components. And it's about separating rendering logic from, separating the presentation from the logic, basically, within React. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to follow patterns like that. Like Gatsby has, some standards, like, you need to have your page, it treats page files a certain way and template files a certain way. But once you're inside of that, it's kind of, you kind of use your own patterns for React. You can use anything, material UI, a strict pure component type of pattern. So it doesn't place too many restrictions on how you do that.
And I think the spin I would put on that answer or that question is, which specific benefits might you want to get from separating out that pure presentation from the functionality or any logic related things? Like, I think that the longer you expect a site to live, the more people you expect to work on the site, the more types of people you expect to work on the site, the more benefit you would get from making that separation very, very clean. And like the Pantheon docs site, like, I don't know if the Pantheon docs site is doing that in their Gatsby site, but that's the kind of site that would benefit from those kinds of distinctions, because it's a site that has like a core team of like 3 people, but then dozens of contributors. That's the benefit we're trying to give. But another customer we've worked through with edge sites that'll have a forthcoming case study. Like, part of the value for them is that the website they were working with was super, super valuable for a very short period of time. Like a website that's celebrating a relatively short-term event that is incredibly important to this organization for like a month, and then relatively important for like a year, and then it just needs to live on the internet forever. And for that use case, Gatsby, the static site generator workflow, just serving files off of a storage bucket, all makes sense. But if you're the developer just trying to get this thing out the door because the launch date is approaching, I'd be very skeptical that you'd get significant benefit from doing that type of separation when, like, a month later, no one will ever again be editing this website.
Yeah, it can be good to have like a style guide too. When you have separate components, it lets you do that easier.
All right. Well, we are at the 2 minutes remaining mark. Alton has a question here. What is your recommended solution for dynamic, personalized content on a Gatsby site? I'll say that Pantheon just had this question come up with a big customer that we are working with on a more advanced edge sites, and we looked at doing like direct varnish edge side includes, where the Gatsby build would include within it edge side include tags that would then get filled in this case by a backend PHP CMS. And for that same customer, we considered, and we might have ultimately just done regular Ajax, where, like, rather than doing that in the edge, just sent out to the browser, hey, these parts of the web page can be filled in by hitting these other URLs and filling them in with Ajax.
Yeah, that's probably what I would say too. I wouldn't have thought of doing like anything with varnish, but yeah, you can use the headers that come from your marketing system to do whatever. Get it from Ajax. Yeah, that's probably what I would do.
Cool. All right. Well, we are now at the top of the hour. Thanks so much for attending the Cliff of Complexity. Yep. I'll see you on the internet.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.